This conversation is a part of a podcast series that looks at First Nations histories of resilience, survival and resistance. Today's episode is the recording of the 2025 History Week panel, Living Histories, First Nations Creators and Researchers in Conversation, which was presented at the Vere Gordon Childe Centre at the University of Sydney, in partnership with the History Council of New South Wales and the Powerful Stories Network. This session is in conversation with Lily-Thomas McKnight, Samantha Snedden and Amy Davidson. This panel brought together First Nations creators and history makers to discuss how they weave cultural, family and community histories into their work. The panel explored how living histories continue to shape research, storytelling, history making and creative practice. How can history live beyond the archive? And what does it mean to research and create in ways that honour intergenerational memory?
All right, I think we're live. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for coming tonight. Looked pretty grim earlier today, but at least it has cleared up a little bit. My name is Mike McDonald. I'm chair and professor in history here at the University of Sydney. I'm here to start to just kick us off. The toilets are just around the corner. If you need them, it's just out the door and then around the corner. And there's food and wine at the back. And I did not bring juices or anything non-alcoholics, but there is water there. Along with the wine and some food. After the event, we'll also retire and hopefully finish off the food and the drink. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Gadigal people, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which the University of Sydney built, which were taken from them, of course, by settlers without their consent, treaty, or compensation. This land here has always been a learning space for many Aboriginal nations, and as teachers and students, we can draw strength and guidance from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge, one of the oldest knowledge systems in the world. This acknowledgement is, for me, at least tonight, a particularly special one. This event tonight is being co-hosted by the History Council of New South Wales, the discipline of history in the School of Humanities at the university, the Vere Gordon Childe Centre for the study of humanity through time, and the Powerful Stories Network. But I think this is a special event because apart from me getting in the way right now, I think it might be our first First Nations only event held here in the VGCC boardroom. Certainly first event co-hosted by our Powerful Stories Network, possibly by the History Department. Can't speak for the History Council. I'm sure you've done much more interesting and creative things than us. And I might be wrong. I am an historian, but not a great one. But it is special for me in particular because it represents what I hope will be a turn in the way that we do things here. With allies and friends, particularly in the History Department and in the Powerful Stories Network, we've been dreaming of ways we can turn ourselves outwards to do more meaningful, engaged work with each other and with the communities in which we are immersed, and of supporting others to do their work and for them to lead us into a new era of community-engaged, community-led research and work. It's effectively to open the doors here at the university, not to tell others what to do, invite them in to tell them what to do, or to boast about our latest research, but instead to create a space so that we can learn from others, come together and learn better. Where lived experience and different ways of history making are valued as much, if not more, than what we find in the archives and in Q1 journals that few people read. So I'm going to get out of the way after saying that. My only real job tonight is to introduce our wonderful organizer and chair for tonight, Jadzia Stronell. Jadzia is a Gamilarey woman, originally from Biripi country on the mid-north coast, Port Macquarie. Jadzia completed a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Sydney in 2024, majoring in history and theatre and performance studies. And she's currently finishing her honours degree in history at University of Sydney, an amazing community engaged project that's breaking a lot of barriers, supporting the work of the uncles and families of Kinchela Aboriginal Home Corporation. With experience as a research assistant at at UCID and in project development and coordination across the fields of history, theatre, and education. Jadzia is an aspiring First Nations historian who is dedicated to helping facilitate the recovery and recognition of marginalized histories. Passionate about public history, Jadzia is already an advocate for collaborative and capacity building research with First Nations communities and is endeavoring to connect First Nations histories of strength, survival, and resilience with wider audiences, most recently through her work as First Nations coordinator even at the History Council, even while doing her history honors thesis. So this is all Jadzia's work tonight, from conception and design, in bringing together this wonderful panel on First Nations creative histories, even in the midst of trying to finish her honors thesis. Over to you, Jadzia, with huge respect and admiration and thanks. I feel like tonight and our future is in great hands.
That was a very, very, very nice introduction. Thank you for that. I'd like to thank everybody for coming here today. I'm glad that the weather has shaped up for this. And hopefully when you all leave, it won't look as glum as it did this morning. So as Mike said, I'm Jadzia Stronell, the Milleri woman and the First Nations Project Officer for the History Council of New South Wales for 2025. So today's panel brings together three fantastic First Nations histories continue to shape their research and current practice. So this panel discussion will run for approximately 50 minutes with a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. And then there's some refreshments in the back there to help yourself with afterwards. And you can mingle amongst yourselves. So today I'm in conversation with Samantha Snedden, Lily-Thomas McKnight, and Amy Davidson. And I was going to say that happened to be in the order that I had it written down, but no, two needed to switch, but that's okay. So I'll go through and I'll just introduce each of our panelists first, and then we can dive right in. So Samantha is a Wiradjuri and Dunghutti woman based on Wangal land. She is an experienced creative producer and an emerging artist and creator who's committed to building meaningful connections between communities and cultural institutions. Sammy's practice centres on weaving and poetry, and her first exhibition in 2023 that combined the two, The Enlightenment, was held at First Draft Gallery. In 2024, Sammy was selected for the National Museum of Australia's Encounters Fellowship, which offered emerging creatives the opportunity to engage in cross-cultural opportunities, working with cultural materials held at Te Papa Museum in Aotearoa and the British Museum at Oxford University in the UK. Driven by a strong belief in collaborations, Sammy works to bridge the divide between colonial institutions and the diverse communities they represent, all the while by striving to foster cultural experiences that are genuine and impactful to those she serves. Then we have Lily at the end here. Lily-Thomas McKnight is a proud Wiradjuri and Gomeroi woman with ties to Yuin country. She's currently studying a Bachelor of Visual Arts in her honours year at the University of Sydney, majoring in print media and completed a minor in archaeology. Lily's art practice is influenced by her Aboriginal heritage and wish to connect to her culture. Lily has worked as a curatorial assistant in Indigenous heritage at the Chow Chak Wing Museum at the university, and later as an exhibition producer and the First Nations research officer for the City of Sydney. She aims to continue working as a curator after university, focusing on Indigenous art and communities. And then lastly, but definitely not least, we have Amy Davidson. So Associate Lecturer Amy Davidson and a proud Wiradjuri woman on her mother's side with mixed Anglo-Settler heritage on her father's side. Amy holds a Bachelor of Arts in Government and International Relations and Indigenous Studies, and began a Master's in Education by Research in 2019, later upgrading to a PhD in 2022. Her doctoral research takes an interdisciplinary approach to defining Aboriginal community-led research, exploring how it differs from other community-centred methodologies from an Indigenous perspective. Amy has coordinated and toured across a range of Aboriginal education and Indigenous study units at the University of Sydney. Amy has presented lectures and workshops for undergraduates, postgraduate and Aboriginal community audiences, and has contributed to projects such as the FAST-funded Community-Led Research Project, Amy's work has been shared at national and international conferences, including WHRN, AAA, NAISA, IATSIS, and AFRE, if you know what all of those mean. So yeah, I'm really excited for tonight, this evening, this afternoon, whatever you like to call it. And I guess I'll just go ahead and start off with the first question. And we can go around. One of you can speak first or intercept. But first question is, how do your own stories, whether that be cultural, family, or personal, influence the research you do and the work you create? So we might have each of you tell us a bit about your past and current work and how you might have woven those stories in. So if anybody would like to start. No pressure. It's worse.
Okay, how my identity and stories,
how you
family stories, histories shape what I do.
Yeah, so you might like to talk about what you're working on at the moment, what you have worked on.
Yeah, so everything.
Whatever you find.
I would do a more relaxing job. Yeah, if it were. And yeah, I'd probably be on an island, just on a beach. But I'm not because I'm really, it informs everything I do, and it's my why for everything. And the more I learn about, like, you know, the way colonial penal authorities used racism and eugenics to weaponize Aboriginal identity and to punish and confine and abuse Aboriginal people, the more I'm driven, the less sleep I get. Not because I get night terrors, but because I'm just so fueled by having that being more commonly held knowledge in the social sphere, and in the social memory of the history of this place. But not just that, but the resilience and strength of mob. The strongest people I know are Aboriginal people. Like, sorry, everybody else. Sorry, not sorry. And yeah, so it informs absolutely everything I do. So from teaching, like why I love teaching, and it's the first guest lecture I ever created was about my identity, and about sharing some of my family story about the complexity of identity and how contentious that is in and outside of communities, and in and outside of families. And the reason for that is because of the history that we have here and the policies and practices that deliberately weaponize identity, like I said. So it informs my teaching. It informs the reason why I wanted to even go into postgrad was because I was very fortunate enough, and still am. I always say I'm too blessed to be stressed, to have Annie Lynn Riley as a supervisor and cultural mentor, and Irene Wardle as well, like very closely. Both women have very closely mentored me, and that is why I have achieved what I've achieved so far. I can absolutely chalk it up to my family inspiring me and supporting me, and Annie Lynn and Irene very closely mentoring me, and keeping me safe in this place as well. So yeah, the reason why I went into postgrad after my undergraduate degree here as well, was because basically I followed Annie Lynn around to all of her subjects. And then I was like, and then I remember in Indigenous research methodologies, which I now coordinate, which is a huge, like, pinch me full circle, I can't believe this is my life kind of thing. But I remember Annie Lynn talking about at the end of the unit, this emerging idea of, although this is the thing, it's not emerging, it's emerging in these contexts, of Aboriginal community-led research. And something happened in my spirit and in my body, and it was like, I was on fire and I just like knew, and I am 37. I did my undergraduate degree when I started when I was 27. So it's been 10 years of being a student, and because I'm in my final year of my PhD. And where was I going with that? Community-led research, I was on fire. And then I said to Annie Lynn, we'd built a relationship at this point, like she'd met my grandparents, etc. And as you do when you work, like, you know, and I said, would you be my supervisor? And like, do I have permission to engage in research with, because Annie Lynn's Wiradjuri and Kamilaroi. And I don't know why, but she said yes. And and so yeah, the whole why was because from everything that I'd learned from Annie Lynn, I could see it's like the answers are there. They've always been there. They're in country, they're in community. We just need to do things our way. And so that's how I found myself as one of those weird people who like writes about how to do what you're trying to do at the same time as doing it. And like they call it methodologies, but like that word is just so like, what am I even saying? Like it took me like I think the first 3 years of my like master's and PhD to figure out what that word even really meant. But it's the how, it's the practice, it's like connecting, you know, all the things to do with culture and country and community and Aboriginal governance and knowledge sharing and knowledge generation and keeping knowledge safe. That is research. We've been doing research like for time immemorial. And so it's just about community having the power in that. That's the problem. Because the practice has already existed, it exists, we don't need to explain it anymore. It's just that, yeah, so that's my, that didn't directly answer the question.
I love it. I love you took that.
It was pretty classic of me.
Sammy? Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I can. It's a bit of a long question as well. So how do your own stories, whether that be cultural, family or personal, influence the research you do or the work you create? And kind of like how Amy did, you could tell us about your past or current work and maybe what you've done to weave those stories in or how that's influenced the way in which you've worked.
Yeah, I would say my family's histories, their stories really influenced who I am today. It's really, especially I owe a lot to my grandparents. My pop was a knowledge holder. She had a lot of knowledge with us growing up. And I think when you're a young kid, and we lost him when I was quite young, and when you're young, you just don't understand the magnitude of knowledge that he has. You know, you always want to be doing other things instead of just chatting or things like that. So I feel like that's really influenced my work in reconnecting and unlocking those memories, because I know I have the knowledge in there. It's just filed away in a different center of my brain. And I feel like a lot of the work I've been doing, I've been really lucky to work with communities and have a lot of moments that's triggered like the access to these memories. And through my creative practice, I would say a lot of my woven works pay homage to my grandparents and to the ongoing relationship I have with them, even though they're not here in the physical sense. Lily?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to extend on that as well. I mean, growing up on Newen land with a lot of my elders telling me a lot of knowledge and not really taking it in as a child, but starting to get older and realizing the importance of that for my identity. Just because with like my art making and working as like a curator, it's not just like an interest. I feel like it's an obligation to advocate for my community and my mob. With like my most recent work, so with my honours project, I've been trying to connect more with like my identity and my community down in Narrow. So that's been kind of, by doing that, it's weaving in their stories into my project. So going home, sitting with my elders and knowledge holders and listening to their stories respectfully and at their pace as well, and not rushing things. And obviously asking them as well if they want to be involved in things too. But yeah, connecting back with my mob has been, I feel, really beneficial to my practice as an artist as well. And it's really shaped how I think view myself and how to, I guess, communicate with other people and decolonizing myself. Yeah.
Amazing. Was there a particular starting point that brought any of you to focus on Indigenous histories in your research or creative work? And this is kind of a stacked question. There's another question on top of this. And do you think your initial methods or intentions have evolved from the starting point? And I do think you kind of all have already talked about that, about how, you know, when you were younger, you did this listening that you might have not, you know, paid enough attention to until later, or, you know, self-discovery with Indigenous identities later down the line. But I guess the first question really kind of stands out for me about, was there a starting point or a turning point that brought you to focus on what you do now and what you're working on now as well?
I think for me, it's always been there, but it's just kind of unlocking it in a way. So like both my parents work with community, and it's always been, my household has been, we're very proudly Aboriginal, and we also acknowledge the pain that comes with that as well. But I think for me, it was kind of moving to Sydney, especially to this university, and not being around other Aboriginal people in my classes other than like the Gadigal Centre, and understanding how much my Aboriginality shapes my identity, and really like shapes me as a person. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any starting points or turning points that really brought you to focus on what you do now with Indigenous history or your history or family history?
So I would say I started working when I was pretty young at Museums of History New South Wales as a First Nations program producer. That was probably the starting point for me. And I always felt called to work in an identified role or uplifting community. Really proud and like to be Aboriginal and to support the community. So I guess the question growing up was like, where am I going to end up? And sort of just fell into the arts. And I remember, if I'm talking about my creative practice, I went out to Blacktown to the Art Centre out in Durry Country, and there was a weaving workshop there, and I was a part of the exhibition. And I remember I was so ashamed. I was like, I don't want to sit down and like weave. I'm going to be really bad. And an elder was like, no, like Sam, you're going to sit down. Like you're gonna do this. And I remember the exact moment. And when I did it, first I was, I wasn't best, but I was really transported spiritually. I feel like ever since losing my grandparents, I've always been seeking different ways to connect with them, connect with culture. And that was the first moment since losing them where I felt like I was with them. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with weaving, and then that really triggered me thinking about, can I research different weaving techniques across the country? What are the colonial institutions overseas holding all the woven objects, and which led me to applying for the fellowship at the National Museum. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I feel like history, like historical context, has to be explained in like all the time. In everything. So even in like my PhD work, even though it's about like Aboriginal community-led research, the history of like the first thing that came out in yarns with there's a Aboriginal governance group as part of the PhD, because I am a young 37-year-old woman, but like culturally young as well, like is what I more am referring to, having that guidance and that consensus building formally acknowledged as well. And obviously I do that as well. You know, cultural protocols happen, you know, outside of that as well. But I just wanted that really acknowledged, an opportunity to also have people like recognized for the role of culturally mentoring in a formal way. Anyways, so one of the first things that came out of yarns was research is a dirty word. And the history is painful. And then so even trying to rush to like, how do we, you know, shift power to community is like already 10 steps ahead, because we haven't healed and done enough truth telling about research that happened last week even, you know. And that was the other thing that came out, that these practices are not historical, they're very much ongoing, and in ways that are kind of more insidious because they're harder to call out because they're less explicit for people who don't recognize. But once you recognize it, it's not implicit at all. It's like very obvious. But then where I really found myself drawn like to the archives specifically, which I've like fallen in love with the archives, and I could just, you know,
Sit there all day,
yeah,
every day.
I could, yeah, which I really would not have put on my bingo card for my personality or myself. But I kind of actually fell into it just trying to find RA work while I wasn't, I didn't have a full-time role yet, and teaching was quiet in second sem. So anyway, someone recommended me for a research assistant, and it was John Clegg, who now is a colleague that like we work together. That he had come from the US to Australia. He did his PhD in historical incarceration of people of color, First Nations people, and African American peoples, like colonial incarceration. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of those records aren't collated and digitized. So we don't actually know at what rate First Nations people, you know, everywhere in the world was colonized at one point, except for 3 countries. So actually him and Adana, who works at Harvard, the two of them, actually I only just found out the other day, they met as undergraduate students and became like friends, bonded over really caring about historical incarceration. Yeah, and so now they've like kind of 10 years later still looking at historical incarceration during any point, any time, whether colonizers stayed or left, what the rate of incarceration was for First Nations people. And so as well, the definition of incarceration is not just formal incarceration like what we know today. It's also informal forms of incarceration, such as like, so including missions, reserve, the stolen generations, which actually started immediately from first contact. And, you know, human theft, murder by the state, all that kind of stuff. And so any form of punishment or confinement. And I didn't really kind of connect it's so obvious now, but I just totally got consumed by this project and stopped doing my PhD. And it took Anilyn 6 months to figure out like what I'd been doing with all my time. I was just like lost in the archives. But the reason I'm so passionate about it is because my papa, he, once he retired, he started this program at Little Bay prison, where it was basically a like volunteer counseling sort of service for inmates who no one would visit them anymore. And then it turned into, then it was also, once people left, people who didn't have anywhere to go or anyone to pick them up, my grandparents would pick them up and give them a backpack with like a toothbrush and a mobile phone and like take him to, you know, get like a Opal card and like, you know, all that sort of stuff. And then it turned into, you know, the Black Grapevine did its thing, and it was like, oh, there's this uncle and he'll help you out. And then he started reconnecting mob who had been incarcerated for a long time and lost connections with their family, and reconnecting people with their family and their communities. Anyway, so he's 86, and he only just stopped when he got cancer last year. So yeah, so he had been doing that for 10 years. And so I think that kind of wanting to honor his like legacy in that work, and how passionate, how much like you couldn't sit down with him without him talking about about the work. And so I think, yeah, that's what's kind of intrinsically motivated me without me kind of realizing until reflection later. But yeah, now this project is just like taken on a whole thing of its own. I basically convinced John, I was like, listen, John, I really like you. You're a mate. Made friends with him first. And was like, you can't lead this project, bro. It needs to be run by an all Aboriginal research team, and there needs to be the right of reply, like Indigenous data sovereignty, like this is huge. And then there was this symbolic moment where there's more to this story, but months passed. Anyway, there was a symbolic moment where he gives Auntie Lynn loves everything on a USB. Like, put it on a USB. And he was like, okay. And he put like all the archival data that him and I collected in Queensland, and put it on a USB stick and gave it to Auntie Lynn and said, here, you decide what to do with it. I'll go back to the US and you can watch me delete everything off my computer. Yeah. And so, but now he's like, it's full circle and Auntie Lynn loves John. So I don't think he would have ever expected that turn of events, but yeah, now we're I don't know, there's a lot more I could talk about, but I don't want to hog.
No, brilliant. All three answers absolutely phenomenal. I'll ask the next question. And it's a little bit different from the first, but how do you allow for history to live beyond the archive? Or how would you like to see First Nations history live beyond the archive if you're working towards that as well? I think it's like important to understand that archive is more like for me, it's more like a Western concept and idea, because like our culture is living and ongoing, where like the archives, people usually view it as things that have happened in the past. So I do think it's important to like reshape how we think of things, and my elders have been helping me do that in a way. So it's like I've been like encouraged to look at country as a living entity that holds memory and history, and in a way is kind of like an archive, and just sitting with country as well and learning from it. But yeah, I think for like to go beyond the archive is like through storytelling and truth telling. So I need to remember the exact quote, but it's an author, Toni Morrison, and she says something like the definitions are made by the definer, not the defined. So it's using storytelling through art or like other means to not recreate, but like correct those past histories that have often been held in archives and take control over the narrative, and really, I guess, tell people, and like even just for ourselves as well and our continuation, so that we're a living culture and have this really strong connection to each other and country, if that's yeah.
I just want to echo what Lily was saying. Completely agree that the archives, you know, it's such a Western concept, but you know, there's archives in our culture, it's through country, it's in our songs, it's in our dance, it's in our art, it's everywhere. I think one way I would like to see it live beyond the walls of an archive, I guess, is working with community and letting community lead about how they want to get their stories and their, you know, share their culture out there. If that's through an exhibition, if that's through programming, but really giving it back and sharing it on a larger scale.
Beautiful answers. So wait, what am I talking about? So in relation to the historical incarceration project here, a tiny bit more context. So there are no collated digitized records of incarceration rates prior to 1978 of First Nations people or non-Indigenous people. I know it's wild. Yes, and I don't need to, you know, harp on about the contemporary statistics. We know the contemporary statistics, but why are they like that? And why are we an international outlier? And it's because that mass incarceration was it was a colonial tactic that was often deployed, but it was deployed here in a way that was unmatched globally. And so hi. That's okay. I know. Yeah, so after John did the USB stick baton pass, Auntie Lynn started working hard on getting data sovereignty happening through IATSIS, through a partnership with IATSIS, because they already house and they already do things that way that are culturally appropriate. Right, that's a whole other thing. But one of the other parts that we knew straight away had to be equal focus of this project, other than collating and digitizing the statistics themselves, which we're obviously engaging with archival, like penal colony reporting, which is horrific to engage with in terms of like they were just not very good at their jobs. And so it's not right to just solely rely on these reports, and that community has the right to reclaim, like these, we've been written about so much, and, you know, with surveillance is also just as heavily a part of incarceration. It's like, you know, they kind of operate together. And so part of it has to be reclaiming the right to reply and not just speaking back to, but taking control and ownership back over these archival reports about us, but also to seek justice, you know, because the irony of it is that it was done under the guise of, you know, justice and protection and, you know, humanitarian aid, like even in the distribution of blankets, which is one of the ways they counted census and surveilled as well. And so one of the things that we're doing in November with Mike, thanks Mike for help pulling together the grant. When I said I want to go for it 2 days before it was due, where Auntie Lynn, Irene and I are hosting a workshop of the right to reply. We're going to invite key community organisations and kind of share with our broad networks. And you know, any community members are invited. You guys can come, and you can come. Any mob in the room, you can come. And yeah, we're gonna share kind of I hate talking about it this way, but like the things that we've gathered. I'll say that, rather than the preliminary findings. The data, yeah, because the data is real. It's our ancestors, yeah, and so it's, you know, bringing back to life the fact that, you know, this is our ancestors that we're talking about, and so as part of that, there's you know, most of the day is carved out for just community to have a yarn about it, and whether or not people want to share, you know, their own oral histories, and lived experiences, and things like that. But then also, because Irene's doing her PhD on, and I'm not going to speak for Irene, but it's a really important part of the project, on blankets, and that reclaiming the blankets, which were distributed as a way to count how many people were. There was lots of things I could talk about to do with the blankets, but basically one of the ways that we're trying to revitalize culture and also have that healing and truth telling kind of all in one sort of, you know, activity is to also, whilst sharing stories and oral histories, is revitalizing kangaroo possum skin cloak making. Yeah, so it's like the cloaks were made illegal and the blankets were given, and so obviously that is a sign of sovereignty. It's proof of sovereignty. It's proof of connection to country, community, and it's your identity. So it's very powerfully symbolic. So revitalizing that practice as a response to the blankets symbolically is really powerful, and that's one of the ways. And we're just getting started. We're warming up country, warming up community with this project, and we're encouraging people, like communities, to do this project, like, you know, do this work themselves if they would like to, and we're happy to support people. So it's not something that we like feel ownership over. I feel like a custodian of, you know, these archival materials, and my role is just support anyone who wants to do that work for their own families or communities, and that we share it in a way that's safe for communities in whatever way that looks like. Yeah.
I think, like, from all three of you, the consensus is very much each of your roles is in some sense to be like a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
Being that facilitator, not for you to speak for others, but to listen and remember, and then facilitate what communities want, which I think is fantastic. My next question is, what does it mean to research and create in ways that honours intergenerational memory? And again, a lot of you have talked about your families and your identity. So this weaves into a lot of the questions that have already been asked today, but is there anything else that you'd like to mention in terms of the way you research, the way you create, that honours intergenerational memory?
I mean, like I mentioned before, like I have been trying to work a lot more with my community when it comes to my art making, just because with, I think, intergenerational memory, it's not just my memory and my stories to tell, it's a whole community, especially because we work so like holistically is expected we work that way as well. So I think to, I guess, honor that memory is really important to, I speak, especially, I don't know, being my age and standing in community and still learning how to do things, is seek advice and guidance from my elders and knowledge holders. And they can also advise like how to present stuff appropriately and how to honor that appropriately, but what to share and what not to share, because some things are only just meant to be for us. And not everything is meant to be for everyone. But yeah, I was going to go on about something and it's left my mind. It's okay. We can come back to you.
I think for me, it's as a young person, for me, I just try and listen actively, really practice deep listening. I feel like I'm really lucky and fortunate to have many mentors around me, and I think also just not underestimating like the yarns around the kitchen table or the stories that are being shared. And for me, as a creative and a weaver, a lot of those stories come out. That's what's appropriate to share, and come out through my creative practice, and stories that I'm trying to share through my weavings. So taking a moment to understand the significance of what knowledge is being passed down, what are the stories, but also, like you're saying, seeing myself as a facilitator, or like bridging a bridge to share with, you know, young generations into the public. Yeah.
I think that memory as well, sometimes it takes time to share that.
Yeah.
And especially I feel like when working with mob and communities, you need to earn people's trust and
Yeah.
have that relationship that's also ongoing.
Yeah.
It's not just you get what you need and then leave and never talk to people ever again. It doesn't work that way. I think it's like also respecting like our cultural protocols, and to me it's common sense, but just like involving everyone.
Yeah. And actually it's funny because that's kind of what the Aboriginal community-led research project is. It's like it's like common sense and like just kind of embodied, but you have to explain that to other people who it's not embodied for them. So it's kind of a funny thing. It's
is
like
funny,
I feel like I'm
realize that.
pointing like out a boring, obvious thing when I'm talking about it. And other people are like, this is really interesting. I'm like, pretty commonplace. Yeah. Actually, both of you said things that triggered what I wanted to talk about. Your dad actually talks about in his writing this idea of a spiritual email, like memories come through spiritual emails.
You come across that, yeah.
Yeah. I'll send it to you. Yeah, and actually I quoted him in my thesis, because I talk about it in relation to living memories with my family. So my papa's mum, she had an exemption certificate, and nobody in my family talked about it. And my papa didn't talk. Everyone knew who they were, but nobody talked about it because his dad was non-Indigenous, and we're talking height of assimilation policies, and Eiley, her Aboriginality was like point of abuse every single day in his childhood and in the home, like in every way that, you know, your identity could become like weaponized against you. So kind of like tying together and the spiritual email thing, really, that was very healing for me, because it helped me kind of reckon with that pain of like, sorry, I didn't like expect to get emotional. I haven't been emotional about it for a long time because I like basically cried for many years over it, but not non-stop. So I thought I'd cried all of the tears for it, but that tension of like knowing but not naming. And when my family started to heal from it and name it, it was like so obvious and hilarious. And so that's what's been healing, is like surrounding myself with mob has like healed my soul, and like but also realizing that I've surrounded myself with mob my whole life. Whoa.
Yeah.
And because we find each other like with, you know,
Subconsciously as well.
we don't, like so, oh God, I could tell you some stories anyways. So yeah, your dad's spiritual email thing, and yes, that really helped me reconcile some painful parts of like kind of not, or like healing, but also not judging my family for the way they handled those policies, you know, because you can't help but feel shame about that, you know. And it's actually a time where it's like there's shame either way, and there's pain either way. And I have privilege from being white passing, you know, and so it's really complicated. And so that's why I like to talk about it, because a lot of young mob have these painful experiences and yearning for culture and yearning for community, and aren't sure how to navigate it and aren't sure how to reach out. Yeah, I know I went on a bit of a tangent there, didn't I?
so much for sharing.
Oh, that's okay.
And thank you, you too, as well. Your answers were really great. Yeah, that was very well put from all three of you. I'll just check the time.
55.
I'll squeeze in one last question and then we'll go to Q&A if people have any questions. And if anybody doesn't, I have 2 more questions here that I can answer. Sure. And I think this is a very nice one to kind of round off the evening, but what advice would you give to younger First Nations people who want to learn more about their cultural family histories and the ways that this learning can be done beyond conventional approaches, like, you know, going to the archives, although that is a legitimate way.
It's a bit of a hardcore.
Yeah, it is. Dive straight in. Just,
You know,
State
maybe put on a
library.
hazmat suit first.
yeah. Any advice?
Well, I feel like we've gone over quite a lot of it as well. And like, I mean, I'm still learning how to do all of this as well. So I do keep that in mind. But I mean, like for me, it's like connecting with my family and like Sammy said as well, that deep listening without judgment. My dad, a couple of weeks ago, he like explained to me, it's like, so you have like 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, but only 1 mouth. So in some cases, you need to do less speaking and use more of the other senses when it comes to learning. I think that's a good way to approach, I guess, relearning like some cultural things as well and speaking to mob and knowledge holders. For me as well in Sydney, it's been good just attending gatherings as well, just showing your face and meeting the local mob. And people are more than willing to help out as well. And it's okay to ask questions too. Like, I think people are quite willing to help out and give advice when it's needed. But yeah.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think we've said it a lot tonight, but I would say seek out those knowledge holders, those people who have stories about whoever in your family, and listen, like really, really listen and take it in. I think too, it's always a journey. It's an ongoing journey. Like a lot of us have traumas and pretty, you know, it's hard and it's not a linear process, and it's never, I don't think there's always going to be some challenges. So just give yourself some grace and enjoy the process of reconnecting with your mob and your family. Yeah.
I think it's taking your time
Yeah.
as well. Just because like you said, a lot of it can be quite painful as well. Yeah. And I think it's good to sit with things and process it, and then, you know, you can move on to the next step in that journey.
Yeah, therapist is helpful.
Yeah.
Recommend that. Culturally safe therapist, psychologist. I'm not even joking. I tell students that all the time. Like, first week of the semester, I'm like, there's free psych services here.
That's true.
You should be there right now.
Utilize it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, again, also lifelong learner. In culture, everyone is a lifelong learner. That's why when, you know, the most like incredible knowledge holder you'll meet will be like the most humble and the most quiet. And as someone who loves to talk, obviously, that has been something that, yeah, I've found outlets for my talking so that I can be more quiet in other contexts. Yeah. But I think, yeah, just kind of echoing things that we've already talked about, just surround yourself with your people and like we're everywhere.
Mhm.
We're surprisingly everywhere. And like, I think that has been the biggest, I think that's why I've really struggled to kind of really succeed at anything in my life until I had like community around me and guiding me and mentoring me is like my life has completely changed. And I think like that has to be the constant. Like that's the best. And also there's a lot of low-hanging fruit at UCID. Heads up. And you should grab that fruit and eat it. Because yeah, it's deserved.
All right, well, that takes us to the end of the discussion. Is there any questions? I think we might have time for maybe one question. Any? It's okay if you don't, because I have more. No. Brilliant. Okay, I can ask one of mine. I was actually hoping none of you would. So where do you see yourself going from here in terms of developing, interpreting, and exploring your own family, cultural, community history? Where to you could just talk about what you're working on now or what you're working on soon. I know, Lily, you're doing honours. You might want to talk about that a bit. Actually, I'll dump you in. I'll get you to start.
Yeah, I can talk about my honours, which I guess it's like more of a stepping stone to like a bigger project. But I've been trying to explore relearning like my traditional languages, and my honours is more about the foundations of language and how country is that foundation. So it's looking at, well, in like UN culture, core learning teachings, so watch, listening, seeing, which is we've gone over that quite a lot, and respectful listening. And God, what was I gonna say? I've gone off, but yeah, the whole like, what I've really discovered in that project is the importance of mob, and like mentioned before in every other question, how it's not only my voice and we're like a collective. So that's something I think I would really like to continue to develop, even like after uni and after my honours project. Yeah, and just, you know, maintaining that connection to people and country. But yeah.
I would say very similar for me. I really want to spend more time out on country, Wiradjuri country in Wellington and up at Kempsey, Dungari country. I feel like spending time with my community, my elders, that really influences my artistic practice. And that's when I feel like the safest and when I like the freest to create. Watch this space.
Exciting. Yeah, actually the same. Like the goal is always to spend more time on country and with community. Like communities all around, but when spending time on your country, it actually wasn't until my husband said, because I also grew up on and off country, outside of Bathurst. Lived on my papa's farm, which they don't have anymore. But yeah, I took my husband out west for like, he didn't know like there was this whole other part of like I have a whole other personality that he unlocked. Well, he didn't unlock it, that he was seeing, that was always present, just not outward. Yeah, like code switching, like what we were talking about before. And yeah, he was like, he's not a very like sounds black and pain. He's not a very spiritual person. He's Greek, and so you know the Aboriginal Greek connection. You know, he's good peoples, but yeah, he kind of he said to me, actually, you're different out here. Like you're calm. I think because I'm like so like how high energy I've been like in this is like how I am all the time. Except on country, I'm not like that. Like I slow right down and I feel so much more grounded. And Auntie Lynn and I have this thing where we'll look at each other and be like, it's time. And that means like it's been too long.
Yeah.
Like I'm feeling low and I need to go be back on country and reconnect. Yeah. Yeah.